Transformation in Trials. Welcome to Transformation in Trials. This is a podcast exploring all things transformational in clinical trials. Nothing is off limits on the show, and we will have guests from the whole spectrum of the clinical trials community. And we're your hosts, Ivana and Sam.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Transformation in Trials. Before we start this week's episode, we have a small disclaimer that everybody that appears on the Transformation in Trials podcast does so in their own capacity and represents their own views and opinions and not those of any other organization that they may be affiliated with or who they may work for. So now we've got that out of the way, I'm really excited this week to be joined by Kristin Petri, who is a pharmacometrician working at Ascendis Pharma. And today's topic is zooming in on pharmacometrics as a discipline and the potential for replacing and augmenting trials with modeling. So, Kristin, really happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here as well. I've been looking forward to this.
Perfect. So have we. And we're going to get to learn a lot more about you and your background, Kristin, as we get into this podcast episode. But what we like to do is dig straight into the topic at hand. And with that, many of our listeners may not have even heard of pharmacometrics modeling before. Could you outline to us what pharmacometrics modeling is all about, please?
Of course. The area of pharmacometrics covers a range of modeling techniques where we use mathematical models to quantify our knowledge of drug biology and disease, as well as trial information. And the data that supports the model development can come from several sources, all from in vitro and literature data through data from non-clinical trials, and also, of course, clinical trials in different populations. And the power of the methodology lies in the integration of knowledge across the development program and also across compounds. Some examples of these models are population pharmacokinetic analysis, PK/PD, where we combine pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. Concentration QTC analysis, where we look into if drugs affect the heart rhythm. Exposure response models. And then we have physiology-based models, which can be very complex models, trying to account for fluxes in and out of organs. And in this area, there are companies that has developed platforms that can be used by several clients, and some of these platforms took years to build. So we have a range of complexity in the modeling in this area.
It sounds like a really fascinating discipline. Where can we place pharmacometrics as it relates to the whole pharma value chain? Are you working in preclinical, clinical, commercial, or is it across the whole board?
Yeah, so the optimal use of all these modeling techniques is if you integrate all through drug development, so that from the very start, you build your model with the data you have there, and then you reiterate and update your model through the phases. That's the most efficient use of these techniques. So it's really from the very beginning all until late phase. So we can start out with, I've been working from the clinical side, so I've often started out with the first in man studies where we have information from the animal studies, but then sort of following the drug all the way to phase 3 and then onwards where we expand the labels to pediatric patients and so on.
Amazing. And is this a new discipline? I must admit, it's not something that I have particular expertise in, but I'm curious to understand a bit about the history and how pharmacometrics came about. If you could share some of that with us, please.
Yes. So We have a tendency to call it a new discipline, but it isn't really. It's been around since the 50s or 60s. And the software we use today was developed back in the 70s. It's an old Fortran program that we still use. But I would say that this area has really developed over the last 20 years. And it has developed with the development of computers and computing power, because these models really are demanding some of them. So computing power has been limiting the development previously. But through the last decades, I would say that a real transformation has happened, where we came from being someone who did some strange analysis that we had to defend and sort of work hard to get someone to use, to a place where we are today, where regulatory agencies are expecting us to conduct these analyses and would ask for them if they weren't done, or in some cases, just do the analysis themselves. The US FDA has in-house capacity to do pharmacometric modeling, and they will do. And they often redo our work to check it as well. So I would say that today it's much more integrated into drug development, and especially FDA and EMA has been drivers in this with different pilot programs and different ways to encourage companies to integrate these techniques more.
So is it an actual requirement to have some pharmacometric modeling as part of a submission then? Or?
I would say that the guidelines are formulated differently, but especially in some areas, it is expected that you would have done some modeling. And I would say especially within pediatric drug development, the regulatory agencies would expect you to analyze your data with these techniques. And if you haven't done it, they will ask, have you considered?
Brilliant. And could you just kind of extrapolate out that example around pediatric trials and just help explain to our listeners in real world terms what this modeling would actually represent?
Absolutely. So the pharmacometrics area is something I spent much of my career working within, so it lies very close to my heart. The motivation for using modeling within pediatric drug development is, of course, that this is an area where we usually have very scarce data. Of course, it's very different to run a pediatric trial compared to running a trial in adults. You can't do all the procedures, you can't sample as much blood as you like, and it is a burden to the families participating in these trials that we have to keep in mind. So usually we have fewer patients and more scarce data, but we still want to offer this population proper evidence-based medicine. So in order to accomplish that, what we often do is we take models that we've built based on data from adults, from other populations, from earlier trials in the drug development, and we couple that with these sparse data, and then together we can make more use of the sparse data we have for pediatric trials. And this has also been an area where the authorities has really pushed the pharma industry to go in and use pharmacometric modeling. And there is examples of where we've been allowed to expand the label to a pediatric population without running a trial. There's one very good example where I've been working with diabetes for many years, and there was this insulin that was, we had the approval in adults with type 1 diabetes and also those with type 2 diabetes. And a trial had been conducted in pediatric patients with type 1 diabetes. Managed to get an approval also for pediatric patients with type 2 diabetes, just based on those data that was gathered in the other population. And this is a big deal because the pediatric population with type 2 diabetes, it's a small but growing population, but it's an extremely vulnerable population and very hard to recruit into clinical trials as well. And they have very few evidence-based therapy available to them compared to adults. So this was a great achievement. And an early example, I would say. I think there are more examples now.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating. Now, what about things like rare disease? Is that a good option for this type of modeling, where you might have find it very difficult to get large groups of parents just due to the nature of the disease in question and it being a rare one? Does that lend itself well to this sort of modeling, or not really?
Absolutely. And I think especially since you can use data from different sources, you can use literature data, different populations together. You can use this to help gain knowledge within the rare area where you have sparse data. So absolutely, it's an important area as well.
I was just wondering, we're talking about modeling and bringing data together from different sources. How would the relationship be between pharmacometrics modeling and the rise of machine learning and AI? Is there any correlation or development where these two trends kind of converge?
Yes, there is. It's not an area where I'm have too much expertise, but what I observe in conferences, this is definitely something that is evolving. I would say that the data requirements to build these models, of course, depend on what kind of model you are building. The software that we're using today, I mentioned augment, which is one of several, but has been sort of the gold standard, isn't really built for big data or that kind of modeling. But I have seen initiatives where newer techniques, where you use big data or you use neural modeling and to me it looks like this is a potential way forward and will likely be more used in the future as well. But where we are today for sort of analysis that it's for regulatory use, maybe a bit too early, but we're likely getting there. It's especially from the academia that I see these first explorations of these techniques.
Super interesting. And now that we talk about data, what kind of data do we need to conduct pharmacometrics models? Where does it come from? How do you get it?
Yes, so the basic population PK models that I've been working a lot with, it's often from our clinical trials where we measure the pharmacokinetics, the concentration in blood over time, and we couple that with different efficacy measures, of course, with demographic data, and also adverse effects. So that's sort of the basic, maybe more simpler models. And then when you look into the physiology-based models where you have this platform that is really trying to describe what goes on in all the different compartments in the body. This has been built up over years, as I mentioned, taking data from literature, different studies supporting different parts of the model. So that's really a big puzzle where pieces have been put together. And you might still have sort of blank spots in your model, but when new data arises, you can then inform that part of the model and work with it like that. So it depends very much on the model.
Is it challenging to kind of de-silo some of the data that's generated in clinical trials and get access to it for pharmacometric modeling, or is that not really something you run into?
Well, when you're working within a pharmaceutical company, you often have the luxury of access to several clinical trials. So I guess that also depends on where you are located. When you're in academia, then the access to data can be more challenging, maybe. But my experience has been that there's been more than enough data to work with, so it's more what you have time to do, really. That we would have done so much more if we had the time. But of course, the data management part and making sure that we get good quality data, that is a big part of the work. It's very important that, especially we are very interested in knowing what kind of doses we're taking at what point in time. And then we couple that with the concentrations we measure in the blood. And if those measurements are inaccurate, then of course the quality of the model will also reflect that.
And Kristin, I know that the pharmacometrics community is a relatively small one, and that people tend to know each other in this community. But do you also share data across maybe companies or across academia and pharma? Is that a way to get more data?
This has been discussed a lot, and often it ends up with being difficult because of companies wanting to sort of protect their data. We've been discussing especially the sharing of placebo data, which could make sense when you develop disease models, for example. So there's been some initiatives, and this is something that is being discussed, but maybe not has been implemented too successfully, I would say. We could definitely do more here. And recently, FDA has proposed that we could also have platform models so that you share your model as well. But this is still early work, I would say.
But it's interesting that both the FDA and the EMA are such large proponents of this type of modeling. Can you maybe share your thoughts of why they are so pro?
Yes, I think what I perceive is that of course, the regulatory agencies, they also see the long time it takes to develop a drug, the cost that is involved, and see these methods as a way of reducing that. And I think that especially the pediatric drug development has spearheaded this. And here you can see that after the approval of a drug in adults, you often have as long as maybe 10 years before you have the pediatric label, which is way too long. It's a long period where the drug is being used off-label in pediatric patients. And this is, of course, a problem. So this has been a way of trying to reduce that time gap there.
That is a very interesting problem. We've had another guest on the show that also spoke to this large delay that we have for pediatric trials, where either the pediatric patients can't get access to the drugs, or we are kind of guessing at the dosage and the effects on them.
Yeah, that is a big issue. And pediatricians, I mean, they used to giving drugs off label, but that's not something that we should be content with. And we should work for evidence-based medicine for also this population.
I'm curious about the technology component to pharmacometric modeling. You touched upon the fact that really the acceleration of this function has been driven by some of the technology that you've seen over the last 20 years or so. Could you dive a little deeper into that topic for us, please, Kristin?
I can do that. When I started out, I feel old when I think about this, but when I started out as a student, I cooperated with a group in Los Angeles, Southern California, the University of Southern California. And we were working with a program called the US to conduct the mathematical fitting of these models. We actually used a supercomputer over in San Diego. And at a point in time, I had this chance to go to this supercomputer center and see the computer. And it was this huge room. It was really big. And I was told that, in the US, there were 10 supercomputer centers like this, and the other 9 were owned by NASA. And we sent these small packages to San Diego to be calculated, and it took quite a long time. Today, we're still dependent on servers, and usually it's too slow to do this on a laptop computer because it is computer intensive. But some of the algorithms have been improved so that speeds things up. But to a large extent, it's the computing power of our computers that has opened up for new possibilities. So now we can do a big bootstrap in a reasonable time. And when I started out as a student, I was doing some manual jackknife analysis that took forever. So a lot of things has happened. And I guess that's also why this field feels young, because we are constantly working with methodology development. It's not static at all. It's new methodologies being introduced and explored all the time.
And are you starting to see, like we're hearing lots in clinical trials about people collecting data from wearables and other types of devices to try and make the whole trial more patient-centric and remove burden on the patient? Is there any kind of knock-on impact to the type of work that you do, Kristin, when you start to introduce some kind of data collection modality that is, by its very nature, going to be generating considerably more data than perhaps just a single form field might have done in the past?
Yes, I would say so. I'm still waiting for that connected device that can tell me exactly when a patient took his or her dose and what amount it was, so I could get that data directly. That's often a pain point to get accurate data, and I can understand why, because if you don't write it down right away, it's difficult to remember exactly when you took your last medication, right? So that's one part of it, that it's a potential for better quality data in for us. The other side of it, though, is that when it's easier to measure, you maybe measure more often. For example, the glucose meters that now people are walking around with that can measure your glucose every 5 minutes or so and automatically send the information to your mobile, to your cell phone. It's fantastic. But when we get that kind of data in, we are a bit overwhelmed today how to handle this. Our non-mem software can't really chew through that amount of data. So there we would sort of think of how to reduce the data. And this is where I think that in the future, likely we'll have newer techniques that can handle these kind of big data sets and not sort of reduce the information, but fully utilize it. So for the blood glucose, instead of sort of looking at the absolute measured values, now people are starting to report the time you're in the right range, blood glucose range instead. So that's the endpoints have changed.
No, it's really fascinating stuff. So what brought you into being a pharmacometrician, Kristin? Can you give us a bit of background about how you got here and maybe some highlights of your journey along the way?
Absolutely. So I started out, I really came from doing clinical pharmacology. I wanted to be out with the patients. So I was in my early days as a PhD student, some of my early meetings with pharmacometrics was, for example, I was at this university hospital in Oslo, at the pain clinic there, where we were working with patients with neuropathic pain, really devastating pain that destroyed or disturbed these patients' daily life. And there were no there's no real cure for this kind of pain. So we're looking for something that can relieve their pain. And we had this group of patients that were using gabapentin, which was a rather new anti-epileptic drug at the time. It took for some patients it worked and took some of their pain away. So it was pretty promising, but there were some side effects. So I was working with a master student to build a model for gabapentin, and this software we were working with, it was very geared towards personalized medicine. And we built up a model for gabapentin by drawing blood from some of these patients. And we had, for example, this one patient who he was taking his gabapentin 4 times a day. But in the afternoon, he had problems with blurred vision, double-sided. It was very bothersome for him. And we entered this data into this software, and we saw that he had pretty high concentrations in the afternoon of the drug. And it turns out that he wasn't getting up too early. He was supposed to take these medications 6 times every 6 hours. And he got up not so early, so he took his first dose a little bit late, and then he got to bed rather early. So he was sort of pushing these doses together. So when we asked him to spread his medication more out throughout the day, his double vision disappeared. And to us as young researchers, that was really showing us sort of this has the power to make an impact and a change in patients' lives. And to us, that was very encouraging. And then I got into pediatrics, where it makes a lot of sense. Whatever you can do to help, that's really encouraging. I also came sort of from an area where I've been focusing a lot on medical ethics. And to me, this is very much to do with ethics. It is quite demanding what we are asking our trial participants to be part of. They are offering a lot on their time, and they're giving the blood and so on. So we owe it to them that the trials we are conducted are well planned, are well designed, and that we utilize the data properly. So for me, it's also a question about ethics, which is very motivating. So sort of three angles in both the practical part, where you see how this can actually make a difference, and then populations where you really see the need.
And who are you working with or collaborating with from the pharmaceutical company standpoint? What other functions do you come across in your day-to-day, and maybe outside of the day-to-day as well?
I would say the list of stakeholders is rather long. Of course, I like to work very closely with clinicians and clinical pharmacologists and other researchers to make sure that the models that we develop are the right ones to answer the questions that we have. So that it takes a lot of effort to build these models. We have to make sure that we build the right ones that can actually make a difference. And of course, to make sure that we have the right data and utilize the data right, we are closely cooperating with statistical programmers, data managers, and statisticians as well. But throughout the whole organization, I would say that there's a lot of everyone that is sort of involved in these analysis in one way or another.
And what 3, I guess, skill sets would make a good pharmacometrician?
Ideally, one should be a statistician,
okay.
A clinical pharmacologist, and a programmer at the same time. Maybe also a mathematician. So yes, it's very multifaceted. We need different skill types, and as it is very few that sort of can be all of this at the same time, we are very dependent on working together and helping each other out. which is also maybe what I'm sensing in the community as such, that people are very open and very willing to learn and willing to share methodology and share better practice.
Thanks for that. That's a lot of school time if you want to be all three, I think. But sounds fascinating. Look, as we draw to the end of the podcast, we always ask our guests the same final question. And that is, if you could wave a magic wand and there was one thing you could change about our industry, what would that be?
I think that it would be, there's absolutely a potential for more efficient drug development if we were able to improve the cooperation dialogue between regulatory agencies and the pharmaceutical industry. It is very, very formal today, with good reasons, but I hear this also from pharmacometricians that work on the regulatory side, that they often encourage us to come with your models early, come and consult us, come and discuss with us. But this seldom happens early enough from the pharmaceutical company side. And this might also be due to lack of experience with this kind of communication from our regulatory teams. So it's new to some and maybe a bit scary to share things before you think it's finalized. But I think that could be a way of making sure early that we are on the right direction, that we use these models right. And some of the the initiatives from the agencies has also to do with this early communication, but we're not there yet. I think that this is something we could do much better.
Brilliant. And Kristin, this has been a fascinating episode. I've really taken a lot from this episode, and I'm sure our listeners will have too. On that note, if they do want to reach out to you and learn more, both about the work that you're doing and more broadly about what a pharmacometrician does, where's the best place for them to contact you?
Yeah, I guess that would be through LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay, that's brilliant. And we'll put all of your details from your LinkedIn, etc., in the show notes, and our listeners can get in touch there. Kristin, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
You're listening to Transformation in Trials. If you have a suggestion for a guest for our show, reach out to Sam Parnell or Ivana Rosendahl on LinkedIn. You can find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or in any other player. Remember to subscribe and get the episodes hot off the editor.